So whether you get in a relationship or not in a relationship is irrelevant, but it's why. Why am I in this relationship? Why am I alone? Am I alone? Am I being single or solo because I'm afraid of love, because I'm afraid of intimacy? Am I being single because I'm telling myself a story? Well, I'm better off on my own. I can do it. Like, what's the narrative
Mhm.
that's driving that behavior?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of season 2 of Queer Relationships, Queer Joy. I'm one of your hosts, Keely C. Helmick.
And I'm your other host, Melissa DeSegurant.
We're very excited here today to be meeting with Robin. And one of the things we do, Robin, to start off the episode is introduce ourselves. So we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves first, and then we'll let you can kind of follow our format or do your own thing, up to you, and you can go from there. So I am Keely C. Helmick. I'm a queer sex therapist, owner of Connective Therapy Collective. I am white, gender fluid, non-binary, queer, solo. Like, I guess I almost want to skip over the relationship dynamic part, but I got to keep saying it. I am solo.
Yeah.
Solo. And I'm Melissa DeSegurant. I am a clinician with Connective Therapy Collective. I am white, gender fluid, bisexual, polyamorous person, solo poly.
Wonderful. I love it. Well, I'm Robin Keesler and I use she, her pronouns, and I identify as lesbian. And I am in this interesting place, like we were just talking about, of also being solo, but for the first time in my life with intentionality, which is
Yes.
so cool and crazy to experience. So, like, really solo by choice. And it's been such a phenomenal experience for me to really, and as I was watching some of your previous episodes and interviews, so fun to really think about. I mean, just all the stuff you guys talk about has been so cool for me. But yeah, really just after I got out of my last relationship, I was in this relationship for probably 2 or 3 years and engaged and had all that, like, right on this train, we're gonna have kids and do all the things and like super exciting. And then with, then deciding not to do that. And like, so
Yeah.
what a cool experience. So it was so neat for me to be able to go through that and be like, yes, like,
Yeah.
to like want that instead of not wanting that, and to be like, and so awesome as I, talking about like being in the dating world again. And like, it has been so fun for me to be dating and,
Mhm.
but like not dating with the intention of getting a relationship, right? And
Right. Isn't that
like,
so different?
yeah, and I've never done that before, and it's
Yeah.
like, I'm talking, it's like, as I talk to my therapist and my coaches and all my people, I'm like, "This is crazy." I'm like, "I have never felt, like, more wanted in my whole life." But,
Oh,
like, right? And so, like,
interesting.
all these, and talking about building connection and creating
Yes.
connection, and it's like my world has opened up to all these amazing people that, for me, giving myself the space to be like, what are the things that I need, and to validate that, right? And to like,
Yeah.
hear all these stories from exes and parents and coworkers about how we're not enough, or like what's wrong with us, or
Yeah.
what we need to change. And it's like, oh, well, you're too anxious, or you're too walled off, or you're too this, or you're too needy, or all these messages. And so it's been such a cool thing for me to take a look at all of that stuff and decide, who do I think I am?
Mhm.
What's actually true about me, because there are ways that we sometimes present in the world, if, especially when we talk about like trauma and stuff like that, which are
Yeah.
a little what we're going to touch on today, and like how those experiences can show up in our relationships, but
Mhm.
we don't have to identify with them.
And we don't have to take what other people say
Yeah.
about us as fact. Like, that's
Yeah.
not, I mean, I was just saying in the last episode that I actually had someone reach out to me in a dating app, no less, and apologize for something. They weren't trying to connect with me. They were apologizing for an event that happened like 6 months ago with a
Yeah.
recent ex of mine. And it was so fascinating to have that person reach out and apologize, because then what I realized is I was like, wow, all of that story that I'd given myself about
Totally.
the event, that I felt bad, that I was wrong, that I had done something bad
Yeah.
because my ex had told me that,
It wasn't
that
true
wasn't
at
true.
all.
You
It
can let
wasn't.
it go.
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
could let it go. I could let it
Yeah.
go.
Exactly. I love that, Keely, because it's like in most people's experiences of us when we talk about relationship with self, like I think it's like, whatever your feelings are about Stephen Covey, but he wrote in his book on 7 habits, he talks about, I really think he introduces that book about talking about personal healing because he's like,
Yeah.
we don't experience the world as it is. We experience the world as
Mhm.
we are. And so even in past relationships, when you have people that will come to you and tell you these stories about you, that's actually not who you are. That's their experience of what's happening.
Mhm.
That's their experience of what's
Right.
happening. And so it's so cool to be able to recognize that and be like, oh, like that's their own shit. Right. And
Uh-huh.
so they see it through that filter, but it's true for us too.
Mhm.
We also then see ourselves through all these filters and whether or not we choose to take on those stories or not. And so it's been really a powerful experience to be able to go into these dating scenarios and be like, okay, this is who I am. These are the
Yeah.
parts that I accept about myself. These are my challenges in the world and like that they're not a problem, but to be able to just hold space and like accept that part of you
Mhm.
and be able to have that open conversation and to see that like it doesn't have to be a problem. And so all these same things about me and the way that I am just to show up as myself. And it's been so powerful to have all these women just fucking surrounding me. They're like, that's amazing. I'm like, "That's not a but like, and not like, I haven't even talked about, like, not even to say it, but just to be like, oh yeah, I can see this is your protest behavior showing up. And like, what do you need right now? And I'm like, wait a second, you're not angry? Or, and it's like,
You're waiting for a certain reaction.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like for them
That's
to
a
just,
trauma, isn't
it's
that?
trauma. Yeah. And so it's
Assuming
like,
that's how people are always going to respond. That's how it's
yeah.
always going to play out.
And how cool to see that, to just have them come with love and be like, "How can I support you in
Mm.
this?" And
Mhm.
also like, and sometimes not respond to it or not buy into it, to just without, just to like hold their own boundary and
Yeah.
let you figure out your shit, but then to still be there. And like to have that actually create deeper levels of intimacy rather than being something that's actually destroying it, it's actually creating it.
Mhm.
Ahoy, Cardinal the Merman here. I know you're probably curious about how merfolk have sex, seeing as we have the bottom half of a fish. Well, I'll tell you that the nipple clamp selection at As You Like It sex toy shop definitely comes in handy. Plus, a lot of their vibrators are waterproof. Find them online at asyouLikeItShop.com and use code CTC Therapy, all one word, at checkout for 10% off. That's CTC Therapy at asyouLikeItShop.com.
Melissa's like glowing right now.
I'm
I
so
swear,
happy.
Melissa's like glowing.
I legit relationship with self. I've been on that train for a bit now.
It's so fun. Well, and one of the reasons specifically I was talking about this to somebody because I'm like, what are your values in relationship? Like, and I really had to work through this a lot in past relationships, but especially over the last 3 or 4 years, I've really been more intentional about that. Like, why am I in this relationship? When there's
Yes.
conflict, when it's hard, what people would ask me, why are you choosing to stay?
Yeah.
And I loved my reason for why I'm like, I'm choosing to stay because there's growth here.
Mhm.
Right?
Okay.
Like there's
Yes.
so
Yes.
much for me that I was able to learn about
Mhm.
about conflict, about how to have a difficult conversation. How do I hold space for somebody else when they're having a different trauma response than mine? And like what does that look like for us both to get our needs met, right? So like this is what I need and this like I need space and you're like and I need connection. Like those are and so many people are like, oh, those are just opposites. It won't work. And I'm like,
Right.
oh, but it can.
Yeah.
And so that was a phenomenal learning to be able to just go through and see the capacity that I have for love, even when things are hard, was so powerful. And now in this space, I'm like, oh, but there's growth here too. So like I did that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, now I want to do this.
Mhm.
And it's so cool to like have, the world just, it's like the universe is just bringing so much love and connection and support and opportunity. And it's like, oh, should we date? Should we be in a relationship? I'm like, wait, no. And I'm like,
No.
that's different for me. And it doesn't even have to be never, but like right now to feel, I don't know, like that's so powerful to be like, wow, look how far I've come. Like I literally am like in total sufficiency.
Oh,
I love
Melissa, it's
it.
the joy of no. It's the joy
Yeah,
of no again. I
I love
passed.
it. Well, and I love what you said about the intentionality, like
Yes.
being solo intentionally, not just like by default.
Yeah.
Or that it's something bad. I mean, that's why I use the word
Yes.
solo instead of single, because
Mhm.
there's so many connotations of like, oh, you're single. Oh, you're single. We need to find somebody for you to match with
Yeah.
you. It's like solo just is like that intentional. I am choosing this.
Yes. Well, and I think so many people jump into relationships because of it's again, it's like a trauma response. You're like, it's like there's these deeply rooted beliefs that I'm not and not like, what if I am broken? What if
Yeah.
it's true? What if I really am never going to find love? What if this, avoidant attachment style or this anxious attachment style or all this stuff, right? Or all these, what if it's true, all this shit they said about me or all those stories that are in my head? And so that fear of what if who I really am isn't enough? And so I think so often we go right back into relationship because it's like, oh, I can breathe. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
see, I've got somebody. See, I'm not alone. I'm okay. I can have relationship. And so I think it's oftentimes this way of responding to this unconscious even fear that we have that we're not going to be good enough or
Yeah.
that we're going to be alone forever. And so we don't have our own power to just stand in that space and
Right.
just be with ourselves and to do, and so I think that often can be like where it's coming from. So whether you get in a relationship or not in a relationship is irrelevant, but it's why. Why am I in this
Mhm.
relationship? Why am I alone? Am I alone? Am I being single or solo because I'm afraid of love, because I'm afraid of intimacy? Am I being single because I'm telling myself a story? Well, I'm better off on my own. I can do it. Like, what's the narrative
Mhm.
that's driving that behavior? And is it a powerful narrative of self-love and personal healing and empowerment and, whatever your values are? Does it align with your values or is it a fear response? Is it a trauma response?
Yeah, I'm looking at that fear response. I mean, when you said that idea of when you're choosing to be solo and not be in a romantic relationship, the
Mhm.
opportunity for all those other relationships that then pop up. Like
Yeah.
there's still connection. Like
Yeah.
it's not romantic relationship is not the only relationship,
Yeah.
right? And
And
it
that's
takes away so much from others.
yeah, and that was another huge thing is it's creating this space for me. It's been so cool to build community, to
Yeah.
connect with friends, and also like that I've always been like serial monogamist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nope, this is what I want. I want to get married and have the babies and live in the house and do the thing. And like it has really created a space for me to explore why. And it doesn't mean that I have to abandon that. Like
Yeah.
maybe if I want that, that's okay. But like, is it what I want?
Mhm.
Like and why do I want it? Like, right. And so it really did create a space for me to be like, to consider something else. Right. And so am I wanting those things because that's what society and the church and the way I was raised, like, right, that was the narrative, like that's what you're supposed to do. And is there something about that? Or is it truly authentic to me? And so it's been kind of cool to explore, more polyamorous relationships and like what I've been really calling more circular dating. And so I've been in, all these multiple relationships right
Uh-huh.
now. And I've never done that before. And it's been so fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And I have just been loving it. And not even because it's maybe how I'll live my whole life, but like for right now, there's so much personal growth to be found for me in this moment,
Uh-huh.
in this dynamic. And so it's just been really cool to have kind of that open heart to be like, what does this look like for me to date all these women?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Know, and to explore what that and again creating opportunity for growth around communication, around getting my own needs met, around asking
So
them,
much.
and like holding space for things to be hard. I think you guys were talking about in the last episodes, right? Like it doesn't mean that it's just easy. And so
Mhm.
as these, women come and they're like, hey, I'm having a hard time with the idea of you dating other people, or I really like you, like
Mm-hmm.
noticing in myself like how much growth I've had because my response is no longer a codependent response of let me fix that for you. Like, ooh, and like having to fix it or having to like make sure they're feeling it's like it's been so cool to be like, yeah, like hold space for that to be hard. And so talking about personal responsibility also as opposed to social responsibility, because I think another thing that can happen is people can be like, well, you're just in charge of your own emotions and that's on you to fix.
Mhm.
And like, I'm going to do me. And so like apathy is not the same, right? Like I don't have to disconnect from that. I can still have compassion. I can care about how they're feeling
Mhm.
and still take care of myself, right? I can still know like this is what is right for me right now. This is where my growth path is. And I love you and I care about you.
Yeah.
And so like let's how can we how what would we can ask those kinds of questions like, right? What is it that you need right now?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And how can I it's that both and, right?
Mhm.
Again, same with the I need space, I need connection. It's like, okay, how can we create space for me and also connection for you?
Right.
So how can we create emotional safety for you and also maintain this container of growth for me?
I want to touch more, if it's okay, around this idea you were just talking about, like settle into the idea of, okay, it's not just about somebody dealing with their own emotions, but what does that look like? I can just hear listeners, or if
Mhm.
I had a person in session right now or people
Yeah.
in session, they would be, well, how does that look? How do I do that? How do I not try to help my partner or help the person I'm dating, but still have compassion for them? That I don't just say, oh, you do you figure it out,
That's
but
not my
that
responsibility.
that's not my
Mhm.
responsibility,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
there is truth in that. As you said, it's the both and, but what
Oh,
does that look like?
yeah.
How
So
do
can you
I
have
know how to do it?
compassion without taking ownership for their emotions?
Yeah, because that's the hard thing with the world and life and as it relates to relationships, but in all things, I think, in is that there's paradox, right? And so
Yes.
sometimes paradox can seem contradictory, but I actually don't think it's contradiction. I think it's contrast. And I
Mm.
think contradiction invalidates the other, where
Mhm.
contrast actually enhances it. And so there's these two things. There's personal responsibility, which is absolutely valid and true in the world. Like that is a thing that exists. And at the same time, there's social responsibility. And so
Uh-huh.
when you get
Okay.
into a relationship with someone, you are responsible for them
Mm.
when you have a child, right? But this is what I love about it, which I also responsibility so often I think we misunderstand it and we make it mean that like it's like personal responsibility, like taking personal responsibility for something hard in your life. Sometimes people will hear that as like, oh, it's my fault. You're telling me it's my fault.
Mm.
It's not the same. Or social responsibility, like if I am responsible for my partner, it's like they hear that as like, well, you are in charge of them. You have to make sure everything's okay. It's like you're, but I love when the also Stephen Covey talks about this, deconstructs that word, and he's like, all it means is that you have the ability to respond, responsibility,
Mm. Mhm.
ability to respond. And so when I have somebody who is feeling hurt or feeling sad or feeling, having emotion
Uh-huh.
around something that I have said or done or circumstance in the world, I don't have to make it mean that it's my fault or that I have to fix it, but I can recognize that I have the ability to respond.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In a way, and is the response that I'm having, is it helping or is it hurting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because I have gone through this process of radical self-love, personal healing, knowing who I am, when your cup is full, when you have your power, you have the bandwidth to then respond to another human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not seeing their emotions as somehow, like you said, your fault or an attack on you. Because I think that's where, gosh, it might be under this guise of like caretaking someone's feelings. But when I'm in that place, I'm really making it about me and my feelings and not responding to their feelings.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't want to feel like, "Ooh, you're having a negative emotion. That's making me feel icky or uncomfortable, so I better fix it."
Right.
Instead of
Well,
just yeah, go ahead.
well, you were saying, so I wonder how this ties in, or I want to hear more when you say this exploration, whether it's, part of what you're going through, as well as when you talk to people and you're coaching people around this coming to this place of self-love. Because I think a lot of people, like you said, even in your example with yourself, I think it is really common that people are saying, oh, I've just been in relationships all my life, or I'm now at a place where I want to work through my trauma. What does that look like to start the path of developing a better relationship with ourselves?
That's such a phenomenal question. So, like, I think the first step, which was what you're saying, people generally at that place have reached, is like understanding why it's so important, right? Because I think a lot of times when people have, they want to work on a relationship or they have conflict in a relationship or whatever, it's like we so often talk about, okay, well, we need to work on communication and boundaries and all these things to like try to improve the relationship or like changing the other person essentially, right? Well, if they would just be different or blah, blah, blah. But like recognizing first that it does begin with self
Mm-hmm.
because, so
Yeah.
often it's like all of it. So often conflict is a projection of, well, they're triggering my thing here or, whatever. And so I think that recognition is always the first step. But then when you get to that second part of realizing that is where the healing begins is with yourself. I teach relationships a little bit differently. And sometimes I think sometimes people are like, I don't know about that. But
Okay, we like controversy.
but I'm okay with that. Yeah, because it's like, let's just look at things differently. Just try it on. And if it works for you, great. And if it doesn't and something else works better, that's fine too.
Yeah.
But the way that I teach relationships is this. And I actually believe that we don't it's impossible to have a relationship with another person, really. Because your relationship is not with that person, it's with your thoughts about that person.
Mm.
So when people say like, "Oh, this is such a phenomenal relationship," and I'm so, like, if I was to go in and look at their brain, what is the narrative that you're telling yourself about that person?
Yeah.
And it'd be overwhelmingly positive, right? And that's actually the reason why you have an overwhelmingly positive. Same with a negative, right? A negative or a hard relationship. It's like the stories and the narrative, the thoughts that you have about when you think loving thoughts about a person, you feel the emotion of love. When you think condescending thoughts about a person, right? That's the emotion that you feel. And so when it comes to your relationship with yourself, it's the same, right? So a person can, be in a marriage and maybe uncover an affair that's happening or something painful. And that's just sort of the circumstance that's happening. But your emotion, your relationship to that person and to that entire circumstance is not actually defined by their behavior. It's defined by the thoughts you have about it. Because there are some people that could be in that exact same situation and be like, awesome, I've been wanting to open up our relationship. Let's talk about this.
Mhm.
Right. And then there are other people who might feel devastated. And so for me, it's in the way Viktor Frankl talks about it in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, is he says, between stimulus and response lies our freedom to choose.
Mm-hmm.
So the stimulus is, this thing that happened, but then what is your response to it? And there's always everyone responds differently, right? And so it's not uniform because it's not actually about the thing. And so how do we choose to respond? And that comes with the thoughts that we think and the narrative that we're telling and what we're making it mean and all of that. And so when it comes to relationship with yourself, it's the same thing. What are the thoughts that you have about yourself? What are the beliefs? What is the belief system that you have about yourself? Is it, I'm broken, I'm not good enough, no one will ever love me, I have this binge eating disorder, and so nobody's going to want to be with me. That makes me really fucked up. I don't make good decisions. I'm not good with money, whatever it might be. So there's this whole narrative and these beliefs that we have about ourselves. And in my approach, like that is what determines your relationship with yourself.
I love that. And tracking back to where do those beliefs get seated, and we named trauma. And that's, I think, where my mind goes and where I think a lot of us go is like, okay, what are these places where I have felt harm and then constructed these beliefs to try and make sense of the harm I was experiencing.
Yes. And yeah.
Oh, good old CBT.
It is. Yeah, it is. Because
Yeah.
that's what you take it on sometimes.
Yeah.
And once it becomes about your identity, then you have to keep it, right? And so it's really that relationship with self and heal. It's really about identity. Where does your identity come from? And what do you believe about yourself? Who am I really? And what am I believing about myself? And so when it comes to healing, and so I do a workshop on radical self-love and personal healing, and that's all what that is about, is really looking at all these emotional wounds, all these trauma wounds, all these things that have impacted us so deeply, all this emotional pain that we're carrying. When we really sit down with someone and I ask them, okay, tell me about it. And just let them go. What you're getting is not necessarily facts. There might be a couple in there, but generally it's belief. It's thoughts.
Yeah.
This is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm believing. And it's that belief that you have about yourself that creates your relationship with yourself. So if you want to heal your relationship with yourself, you have to heal what you believe about yourself
Mhm.
and really take control of that.
And even as you're saying that, I'm thinking about what beliefs do you have about your own capacity to grow
Yeah.
and change and outgrow patterns and narratives. You
Mhm.
know, we know neuroplasticity is a thing, but I don't know that, at least from what I'm hearing from my clients, we don't always believe that we can create new patterns.
Yeah. Totally. I hear that from people all the time. They're like, and I ask them, tell me about that or whatever. And they're like, well, I and they have and as they're talking, I'm hearing this is what they believe about themselves, this is what they believe about themselves, this is what they're believing about themselves. And they'll say things like that, well, I just attract toxic people in my life. Like, that's a belief.
Yeah.
When you believe that, like, that's what you manifest, that's what you
Right.
and you're because you're living from that place. And so I have a whole model that shows how our thoughts actually create our actions and results in the world, but it all comes from emotion. And so, behavior and emotion are tied together in the limbic system. And so that's where emotion is created. And so, and it's tied to consciousness as well. And so again, when you think a thought, so when you think a thought, it creates an emotion. And that emotion is what drives us to action, right? So, and that was by design, right? Like, if we feel fear, we sometimes need that, right? To be like, okay, I'm going to get away from danger. I'm going to do this. And so, but when we think loving thoughts, again, it creates loving emotion. And from that emotion of love, we take different actions. So when I'm feeling shame, I act differently in the world than when I'm feeling enthusiasm. When I'm feeling confused, right, I act differently. That's when I spin out, or I hide, or I procrastinate, because I'm telling myself a story. I don't know how, this is too much, I'm overwhelmed. And so those thoughts create those emotions, and those emotions impact the way I behave and show up.
I would caution listeners too, because this comes up for me, and humor is a huge resource, and it's one of my biggest ones for sure. But self-deprecating humor, check into that one, y'all. Because we might say it, and I've heard this from clients. I've heard things like, "Oh, my broken trauma brain." Wow, that's a belief. And
Story.
if we're trying to spin it off as kind of a comic, for me, and I'll only speak for myself here, but oftentimes when I'm using self-deprecating humor, it's to reclaim something that I felt shame about. But that's like the intention of it, but I haven't actually done the work of unpacking that thing.
Yeah. I think because you're minimizing it. And so if I can minimize it, it doesn't hurt so much.
Yeah.
But if I don't, humor is a way to do that. But if I don't have that tool, then all of a sudden I have to, like, reckon with it. Be like, wait, are you telling me that this is actually a big deal and it's important? Then it's like, fuck,
Right.
Yeah. So do you have assignments or exercises or things that you have clients specifically do, or when you're in these workshops that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I walk them through a process. And so for me, radical self-love and personal healing, there's two things, again, that it's like that most people want. And it's like, they want to stop feeling pain. Right.
Yeah, that's
And
good. Don't want to
yeah.
be pain anymore.
and they want to start feeling positive emotion, right? So they want to stop feeling negative emotion, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Shame, fear, anxiety, self-doubt, all this stuff that we carry that's again tied to these belief systems, like Melissa said. Like, just so I help them to recognize first that like those emotions are being created in your mind, right? By the thoughts that you're thinking, the stories you're telling. That's why you're feeling that emotion, is because there's
Yeah.
a belief you have that I'm not good enough, I don't know how to do it, I'm not good with technology, whatever. And all those stories are creating this emotion. And so understanding that first. And the first step is I help people figure out how to actually process that pain and the trauma and healing those emotional wounds. And so I think when you're able to have, and it takes some courage and some emotional bandwidth to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to look at this thing. And so we talk about healing from shame or releasing resentment. And so we look at like the obstacle and the elephant in the room, because like that's what's keeping us from our joy. So
Yeah.
it's powerful to, and I also teach people how to create positive emotion. And so, because that's also something intentional, you can literally create that in your mind. Like, I sit down with a piece of paper and maybe I'm feeling anxiety about coming on this Zoom call. And when I sit down and I do what I call a thought download, okay, and I just dump out my brain onto this piece of paper, all the things I'm thinking. And then it's like, oh, what if I don't fit in? What if I'm not good enough? I mean, these people are so much better than me, or whatever, right? And you get out all those thoughts that are in your brain, because that's what's creating the anxiety,
Right.
or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, okay. And then I can recognize, okay, what's really true.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can rewire my brain to focus on these other things, right? Like, this is an amazing opportunity to connect with these two beautiful women that are doing something amazing in the world. I have something different to say, maybe because I am different. Maybe everybody doesn't look at relationship the same way. And like, that's the beauty in it, right? Or whatever it might be. This is just an example, but you can kind of see, and then all of a sudden I can uncover the truth.
Yeah.
And then when I'm like, oh, and then my brain starts thinking those thoughts. Like, this is going to be fun. This is going to be phenomenal. These, whatever. And then I start to feel excitement. And so it's the same with that relationship with yourself. So when it comes to radical self-love and personal healing, I take people through a process of understanding, what is it that you're believing about yourself right now? Like, what's in the way? And
Yeah.
can we deconstruct that so that you can see it like, oh, okay, this is just something I picked up somewhere. Like, it's a choice. Like, so many people don't think it's a choice like that. And that keeps you stuck, right? Because, well, I was abused as a kid. I'm an alcoholic. I'm this. And it's like all the things that they're giving their power to. And when you can like bring it back and be like, but hold on a second, like, and recognize that like it's that we do have the power to release that and to create a new story. And then I help them to do that, to rewire their relationship with their self. What do you want to believe about yourself?
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes it's starting with that, because sometimes we can't go from I hate my body to I love my body. Like, it's just too much. But we can go from I hate my body to I have a body.
And we can still be in connection with people while we're doing that process. And I think
Absolutely.
that's another thing that comes
Yeah.
up, is this idea that, oh, we have to be completely quote unquote fixed. We have to be in a certain space. I need to be in a certain space of my trauma healing to
Right.
in relationship to others. And I think that's the piece too, when you're thinking about this goal, like, what is the goal of dating? There's such this, we'll say it again and again and again, the relationship escalator. There are reasons for dating and connecting. If we think about dating as connecting, and whether it's romantic, sexual, what kind of intimacy, it's like, I mean, because let's be real, sometimes we just connect, we date to have sex with another human, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Sometimes we date to have emotional intimacy that is not sex. There's all these different pieces of reasons, but it is so ingrained in our culture that dating is to be in a serious monogamous relationship that's going to lead to being married. And that's just not the case.
And like, what are those, and like like when I'm having those thoughts,
Yeah.
I think that they're just not, that's a belief system.
Totally.
And it's like, and that's exactly what I went through, Keely, which is so cool. It's like for me to be like, oh,
Robin, we went through the same thing. You know this. You don't even know how, like, you don't even know. You and I are, the universe is
yeah.
such tricky little
Yeah,
fade.
but like it's just a belief. It's like, wow, and that was actually one of the things that was so powerful in my last relationship is like I had this, I'm like, I want it to look like this and this and this. And she was like, but why? It could also look like this and this and this.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
it was actually so cool for me to be able to get to the point of like, okay, like, am I open to considering that? And it doesn't mean, and I was like, yeah, actually, like, you're right. I could do that. And it doesn't mean that I have to, but like
Yeah.
how powerful to know that I can.
There's
Mhm.
options, there's
I have
choices.
I have options, I have choices, and this is just another one of those to be out there and dating and in these open relationships and dating multiple people and enjoying intimacy with all, and like so cool to be like, wow, like this is an option too. And I think that's what I do also with the mindset work and with the healing is that it's like you don't have to put down this story, like, because some people want to hang on to it, but like just to recognize that it's an option is powerful. To be like, what could I think instead about, that abuse that I suffered? Like, you don't have to be like, oh, it was such a gift.
Mhm.
Totally don't have to. Some people do. It's an option, but you also don't have to be like, I'm destroyed because of it.
Mhm.
And so I sometimes challenge people to come up with like at least 20 options. And like some of them can be shitty that you don't even want, like, you're like, this is ridiculous, this is delusional, but like, is it an option?
Yeah.
Because it just gets your brain going, right?
It's that space between like the person and the thing. Like even if you're gonna, like you said, choose the same narrative or the same perspective, you're seeing it as a narrative, not as yourself.
Exactly. And you have the power of choice.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, all of this is this connection with self is to create more joy, both with ourselves and in relationship to others. And so we always like to wrap things up with what our queer joy is of the week. And we ask our guests as well as each other. But
Yeah.
before we do that, I didn't want to forget, you mentioned some awesome workshops that both that you've done in the past. And I would love for our listeners to know both how to contact you and what your upcoming workshops are. And then we'll talk about queer joy.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to be doing a live event workshop actually at the end of this month on what to do with emotional pain. And
Ooh.
is I think taking like that as the obstacle and dealing with that first. And then the second piece is that I will do later is then how do we, after we clear that up, create the emotion and the joy that we want in our lives and the connection and whatever it is. So what to do with emotional pain is going to happen on Sunday the 30th. And people can email me or find me on Facebook if they want to participate in that. And then that's always a lead into my 6-week workshop on radical self-love and personal healing. And we go in and we look at our trauma wounds and and how to heal those, like where the actual pain is created, which of course is always in our minds with our narratives. And then how do we claim our power in rewriting that narrative so that we can be the person that we want to be in the world. So that's what I have coming up.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can email me, robin@robinkeesler.com is my email, or find me on Facebook. I'll post the link to sign up for that free workshop on my Facebook page. So that's just facebook.com/Robin Keesler. And I'll post it in there on my business page. So
Awesome. We can add it to our calendar as well.
sure.
Well, who wants to start with queer joy? I have one, but I don't have to be the first one to go.
Go ahead.
I'm feeling it, Kaylee. Go.
I will
I
admit,
see the
was
joy.
I can
sitting
see,
there and I was
yeah.
like, what am I going to say? And I forgot I am super excited because it was over like the holiday. It was back in December, but I met with the executive director of Pride Northwest. And I am so pumped as the president of Orsage. We are going to be doing a emotional well-being booth at Pride this year. And to find out that Pride is going to be in person back on the waterfront in Portland, Oregon. So excited. So how more queer joy can we get than talking about Pride? Hello.
Oh, so awesome.
Yeah, super pumped.
Well, I can go next then.
Okay.
My queer joy for this week was actually, I just have been, like I said, enjoying these relationships so fucking much. It's been so fun and I had an amazing New Year's Eve with this girl that I've been dating. And we stayed up until like 5 o'clock in the morning, just like talking and we having champagne and playing games. and we played a game called You're Not Strangers. You guys heard about this?
Ooh, no, sounds like a good dating game.
So fun. Yeah. And so you pull cards and they have questions on the cards that you like talk about and answer. Like, have you ever gone through an ex's phone or whatever? Or what do like it's like,
Dang.
or, whatever, and vulnerability stuff and getting to know each other in these like deeply intimate ways. And it was just so fun. And I think she was like, do you realize it took us like 3 hours to go through like 10 cards because we just like were talking, and it was just such a cool and fun experience of connection. And like you talked about, Keely, and to be still going through my own work, but again, to be able to be like, I can have joy and connection in this process. Like it's not easy. And so what a cool and fun experience for New Year's Eve to come into the new year that way. So that was my
Awesome. Yay.
I
I love it because I mean, how more gay can you be?
Oh my God.
Like
So
talking for 3 hours in a game. I love it.
It's not, and it's like this whole week I've been like, we have to go to sleep. I can't even say how many times. And then like last night we're up till 2:30 in the morning. I'm like, I'm not 24 anymore.
Nor am I.
I mean, but like it was just so like we can't stop talking, and it's just like such amazing conversation, and I just have loved every minute of it. So
Yay. I love it. I this whole podcast, I'm like gleaning inspiration from other people. And I love it. It makes me happy to hear that this is happening in the world.
Melissa and I are really, really good at compersion. Like super.
Yes.
love it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm still, like I said, I'm rocking the solo thing, but my queer joy has been like really, I feel like 2021 was a big year of just healing from everything that my end of 2020 threw at me. And I felt a difference in my energy levels. Yes, I am still solo and I'm like more actively a solo. Like I can do something besides just survive day to day now, which is like wonderful. That's a joy in and of itself. But what has happened as a result is my creativity is like super come back online. And I've mentioned this before. I think some of that is seasonal. Winter is like you go inward and you get to create. But the joy for me there is it's not just in what I'm creating or whatever artistic process I'm engaged with. It literally changes how I carry myself throughout the day. Like I have a different energy when I'm making the bed because I'm in flow. So and for me, my spirituality and creativity like may as well be the same thing. They're very linked. So just to notice that I've been in flow and I continue to be in flow, and that is such a gift. And I'm really grateful.
No, that's so cool. I love that, Melissa. And actually, if it's okay, that just reminded me of something also.
Totally.
I would like to point out that when we talk about like, Keely's asking, what's the process for creating this radical self-love, or what's the process for healing that relationship with yourself? And I think, the process is understanding where it comes from, like how do we create relationships? Like where does the quality of that relationship is it created? And I think largely it is the way we talk to ourselves and the belief systems and stuff. But when I talk about personal healing and healing from trauma and stuff, one of the things that I have experienced for myself and I believe to be true is like, and when you talk like, when do you know when you're there? Right? Like, and do I have to rob myself in the middle? Of course you don't. But like one of the markers for those of you, if this is useful for anyone, that I have always used for myself, and I learned it through experience because something would happen. And I'm like, and just like with that person, like, oh, I'm having an emotional response about something. And I'm like, awesome. And I can like turn towards that person and hold that space for them without fixing it.
Yeah.
Bam. That was it. I was like, I did it. Like, right. And so it's like, to me, yeah. And so I think one of the cool things that I like to think about is like, as you're assessing yourself going through this journey of like recreating your relationship with yourself and your narrative and your belief systems, because it influences how you show up and how you feel. But also like, are you finding yourself? I think it's like somebody told me that, they're like, Robin, the universe is just going to keep giving you this shit until you learn to respond differently. Right? Like you're going to keep having these same experiences. People are like, why do I keep having this pattern? And it's like, the universe is like, because baby, you haven't like figured it out yet, right?
Haven't shifted
We're still
it.
learning. You haven't shifted it. And so it's like, for me, one of the hugest markers of healing from your own personal traumas and really recreating a powerful relationship with yourself, for me, has been to go through the same experience and have a different response.
Yeah.
And so when I would go through experiences with lovers that were hurtful or painful, and I would and then have the same thing happen again, and be like, but I was in my power. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
right. To have someone say, oh, you're this, and feed you a negative story about yourself or belittle you or cut you down. And before, like Keely said, I would believe it. Be like, oh, maybe it is my fault.
Uh-huh.
And then how I knew I went through this process was when that same thing would happen. And I'd be like, that's a lie.
Ooh, patterns, breaking patterns.
Totally different thought, right? And it's like, and I felt powerful. And so I think, I don't know if that's useful for you, for your listeners or not, but I appreciated understanding that.
Yeah.
And then catching myself in the middle of a situation and literally seeing myself respond like differently. And so I think that's a huge marker of personal healing.
It is huge. Those are the things that I like. Well, now that we're teletherapy, I've totally started doing the little like you could do emojis, like or reactions. And I literally, clients are now laughing at me because I'm like, I'm just bored with teletherapy. But those are the moments where I am literally like putting my hands up and like, yay, let's celebrate for a second here. And I use that little like celebration confetti.
Yeah.
Because we
Well,
need a pause, and it sometimes feels
Yes.
small, but it's like a big deal to really notice like, oh,
Yeah.
I responded differently.
Yeah. And like celebrating those wins, you know, and like what's working, like you talk about like, oh my God, this is working. And like this, you know, celebrating those little wins as you're going through the journey and allowing yourself to enjoy connection and creativity and just all the joy and the love that's in the process, you know.
Oh, and that's such a good, I am just imagining as we wrap up, just this idea of like knowing when you've made a shift,
Yeah.
having this self-love,
Mm.
being in this great relationship with self,
Yes.
and you're in your power.
And you're in your power and you're like, you got it, Robin. You got it, cute. Like you did. Yeah. Fuck yeah. You know, and just to be able to celebrate yourself.
Yeah. Celebrate joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Robin, for joining us today. And thanks everyone for listening. Y'all know how to contact us. Please message us. Tell us what you think of it. Tell us ideas for this next season, what you want to hear. And again, I hope you all have a wonderful, queer, and joyful week.
Yay.
Thanks for listening to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy, a podcast by the Connective Therapy Collective. Hosted by Keely C. Helmick and Melissa DeSeguron, with audio edited and produced by me, Cardinal Marking. Intro music is by Bad Snacks. This week's guest was Robin Keesler. Find Robin online at robinkeesler.com. That's ROBINKEESLER.com, or find the link in our show notes. If this episode made you smile or think, tell us about it. If you hated it, tell us about that. Review us on iTunes or Spotify. Yep, you can now review podcasts on the Spotify mobile app. Or send us an email at info@connectivetherapycollective.com. For more queer joy, visit our website at www.connectivetherapycollective.com. Love ya. Bye.